Hello and welcome to another episode of The Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters and I am your host for this fabulous little half hour where we discuss all things motorsports, especially if it's on four wheels. The motorsports calendar is quite large, but it does have that little bit of a break between December and January. But now we're basically just about getting into the full swing of the start of the motorsports season for 2025. We had the Rolex 24 at Daytona over the past weekend, and then we're also looking ahead this weekend to the NASCAR Clash at Bowman Gray, which is going to be a big deal. First time NASCAR's been back at that racetrack, the Cup Series, I should say, in almost 50 years, if not more than that, about maybe 50, 60 years. So a big weekend coming up if you're a NASCAR fan, but also a lot of news to cover regarding the aftermath of the Rolex 24 at Daytona. So let's go ahead and get all the housekeeping items out of the way. If you like this show, please remember you can follow me on social media at RPEETERS. That's RPeters33. You can find me there on Twitter, on Blue Sky, on Instagram, anywhere you want to get your news. I'm there if you want to follow and support the show. And also don't forget to subscribe to WTHR on YouTube to find out whenever a new racing report drops. Also stay with WTHR Plus because a new episode of the Racing Report premieres every single week. So we'll keep you up to date on everything going on in the world of racing, and we'll make sure we're previewing all of the week's races as we gear up for it. So let's go ahead and jump right on into the news of the week. There's a lot of it, and we're going to start off with Formula One, a big bombshell, because new FIA guidelines could result in steep penalties for F1 drivers if they are found to be swearing or participating in any form of official quote-unquote misconduct. So we're gonna let's dive into this a little bit here. So the first offense is going to result in a $10,000 fine. Now keep in mind, all of these fines that the FIA has announced are going to be quadrupled for Formula One drivers. So if you're racing in any other FIA sanctioned series like the World Endurance Championship or the World Rallycross, you're subject to this $10,000 fine. But if you're a Formula One driver, it is quadrupled. So your fines are quadrupled if this happens. So if you swear, or if you give an obscene gesture at another driver, if you maybe verbally assault somebody or actually physically assault somebody, they're not going to let you get away with that. They're bringing down the hammer. And Mohammed Ben Sulayem, the now president of the FIA, has been very vocal about this over the last couple of years. I believe one of our first episodes ever of the Racing Report, we talked about Mohammed Ben Sulayem's desire to get rid of swearing in Formula One, and obviously this is encountering a lot of pushback within the paddock, and especially since a second offense will be a 20,000 euro fine or 80,000 euros for F1 drivers and a 1-month suspension. Now, if you get caught a third time, it's similar penalties will be given. It's even worse. But actually, the second time, you can get suspended for 1 whole month. They're not playing around here. Mohammed Ben Sulayem really wants FIA drivers in Formula One across all FIA sanctioned series to stop swearing. And I know this is very controversial. There's a lot of other things that maybe Formula One should be focused on, and especially the FIA, rather than maybe policing how drivers conduct themselves in the race car, outside of the race car. I mean, obviously there's a line that can't get crossed, but it's racing. The emotions are high. Fans typically want to see this kind of emotion out of their drivers. But Mohammed Ben Sulayem has been very vocal on the fact that he does not like that. So we'll have to see how that goes. Now, additionally, not only do these fines and these penalties cover, just swearing or any other acts, but also similar penalties will be given for any words, writings, or displays of political, religious, or personal statements that go against the FIA's statutes that they've now set forth, which means drivers like Lewis Hamilton or former drivers like Sebastian Vettel, that stuff's not going to be tolerated anymore. Lewis Hamilton has been very outspoken about a lot of causes that are very close to him, and now it looks like he's not going to be able to do that anyway. So we could see, maybe, I would be surprised if we didn't see some kind of civil disobedience out of Hamilton there, because he has been known to do it in the past. And of course, Seb Vettel, if he was still in Formula One, he would definitely be doing that. So it'll be very interesting to see how some of the drivers react closer to March when the season starts down in Australia. But really, just some very big crackdowns going on within the FIA. Now, the second and final piece of Formula One news that we're going to talk about today is that Johnny Herbert, former F1 driver and pundit on Sky Sports F1, has apparently been dropped as an FIA steward, according to Motorsport.com, because of his continued deals with betting companies. So not only was, I guess, from what I've understood, is this was also due to, his relationships with different media outlets, not just Sky Sports F1, but also different media outlets as well. And again, he continues to be sponsored by betting companies or representing betting companies. And I think you can see where the FIA is kind of getting a little bit like, maybe we should step in here. So Johnny Herbert, no longer an FIA steward, but free to do whatever else he wants. Now, in the IndyCar world, let's talk about some IndyCar news, because there's a decent amount, not a lot, but some interesting little nuggets and tidbits and rumors going around here. Number one is that apparently McLaren is reportedly eyeing an expansion into sports cars, which could impact both of its IndyCar and Formula E programs. Zak Brown wants to be in the WEC by 2027, and he's also said that he wants to be in IMSA by 2028. And the president of IMSA even said, broke the embargo, I guess, on this by saying over the Rolex 24 weekend that he expects the Papaya Army to be in IMSA at some point. So it could happen within the next 2 to 3 years, where we see McLaren branching out into sports cars. Now, again, the big question then becomes, what does this mean for their IndyCar and Formula E programs? Because obviously a sports car program is not going to be something that's going to be easily accomplished, especially if you want to compete with the likes of, the Penske Porsches or everybody in the WEC. It's going to be a hard ask for some of these McLaren engineers. So they're going to be evaluating, what does their IndyCar team look like? Do they keep 3 teams? Maybe they go down to 2, maybe even 1. What do they do in Formula E? Do they stay in that championship, or do they maybe reevaluate and move some of those funds into maybe another championship? All of these things are definitely going to be topics of conversation whenever McLaren is discussing their IndyCar future or Formula E future, until we know exactly what they've decided to do. And I will also add that Zak Brown has now, in addition to saying, okay, we're evaluating everything, he's also talked about IndyCar itself, and has said on Wednesday that IndyCar should, quote, slipstream on the back of Formula One's success. Now, I'm going to read the full quote here that was taken from the Motorsport.com article about this, where Zak Brown says, quote, I don't think IndyCar slipstreams Formula One as much as it could. They kind of want to be their own thing, which I think is great, but when you see how popular Formula One is, I don't see Formula One and IndyCar competitive with each other. I think IndyCar should slipstream the back of Formula One's success, and I think they need to do more of that. So that is Zak Brown's feelings right now on the status of IndyCar, how they are conducting their business and how they are working with their sport to grow it. Zak Brown would like to see a little bit more ideas taken from the Formula One bank and put into the IndyCar bank. We'll see how that goes. Good luck convincing Mark Miles and Penske Entertainment to actually invest in the series. But I will say, as I make that joke, there has been some rumblings about an IndyCar return to Australia. Now, this is from speedcafe.com. They are reporting that the South Australia Motorsports Board is reportedly open to hosting a non-championship IndyCar race at the Adelaide Street Circuit. However, it would not be during the Supercars race weekend. So, if you are a longtime IndyCar fan, you are familiar with when they used to race at Surfers Paradise, that street circuit on the Gold Coast in Australia. And obviously they stopped that after the 2008 season, and also the Supercars has truncated that circuit quite a bit. It's not really suitable for hosting IndyCar races anymore, so you probably won't see it coming back to the Gold Coast. But when they did do that race, it was typically a companion race where the Supercars were basically the support series for the IndyCar series. If this would go through, that would not be the case. So the idea that the South Australian Motorsports Board is trying to float around right now is that, okay, well, we're going to have these, but what we're going to do is we are going to have the IndyCar race run a week before the Supercar race. So kind of like a doubleheader, but just not on the same weekend. But there will be events going on over the course of 2 weeks, which could be very good. Now, again, this is all preliminary. This is all talk. Nothing's been announced. This is just an idea that's been floated by the SAMB, and they are floating it with IndyCar because, again, IndyCar is targeting several non-championship races in international markets, and Australia obviously being one of them. So it'll be interesting to see if IndyCar, which, again, they've been talking about this for what feels like a decade now, about wanting to do international races and going and doing all that. Mark Miles has been talking about it for quite some time, but we'll see if it happens. Again, with a lot of IndyCar news, it's a lot of talk, and very seldom does it actually come to fruition. So we'll have to see if we actually are racing in the streets of Adelaide here in the next couple of years in the IndyCar series. Speaking of Australia, well, that's a great way to segue into our Supercars segment of the show, because according to the 2025 operations manual published last Friday, teams using the same livery design on multiple cars must now, quote, ensure that there is an obvious difference to distinguish different cars. So what they're basically saying now is, gone are the days of having literally the exact same livery on one car as your other car. They're no longer with that. Supercars is now saying, okay, these cars have to look different in some ways. And it could be as subtle as just simply changing the paint color of the rearview mirrors. It can be as simple as that. The driver's side and passenger side door mirrors is what I'm talking about. That's what Supercars said. It can be as simple as that, but they just have to be different. So we'll see when all of these liveries start getting launched here in the next couple of weeks, what some of those look like, and we'll probably see a lot of the AAA racing cars. They have to be different now. They could still be sponsored both by Red Bull, but they'll have to be a little bit different in the design. So some interesting news there. Now, let's talk to some IMSA news, and this is going to be a bit of a spoiler, and ahead of time, I'm so sorry if you were waiting to hear us break down the Rolex 24 results. Unfortunately, some big news broke on Wednesday that affects the Rolex 24 results. We now know that Tower Motorsports, who crossed the finish line first in LMP2, has now been demoted to 12th in class, and United Autosports has been declared the winner just 3 days after the Rolex 24. Now, IMSA officials say that the Tower Motorsports entry had a skid block underneath the car that exceeded the maximum allowable wear of 5 millimeters. So what you need to understand about this penalty is this is not a situation of cheating. This is not a situation where they were found to be outside of the rules. This was a situation where the car, the wear and tear that went through the car over 24 hours ended up making the car fail post-race inspection. So that skid block that they had underneath their car, it could only be shaved off by 5 millimeters, and it was more than that. And that's why they were penalized and lost their class win. So that means Sebastian Bourdais has now lost his LMP2 win, which he put out a statement on Wednesday on his social media accounts where he understood the penalty, but was still quite disappointed by that. Now, we'll talk about who won in class, who's now been promoted when we get to that segment in the Rolex 24, when we talk about that coming up here in a little bit. So don't go anywhere, because you're going to find out who's the new LMP2 class winner. But hey, as I said, don't go anywhere, because we do have to take a break here before we get into some NASCAR news. But when we come back, we are going to recap everything that's going on in the world of NASCAR to get you ready for the Cookout Clash at Bowman Gray, which is going to be a thrilling event. I'm excited for it. We'll talk about all of that. We'll get ready for that Clash at Bowman Gray coming up here on the Racing Report. So don't go anywhere. You're watching the Racing Report. And welcome back to the Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters. And it's now time for us to discuss everything going on in the NASCAR world as we get ready to bring back the racing series. Cars are on track this weekend, guys. I cannot believe it. We have made it. We made it. We made it. We made it. I cannot believe that we finally made it another off season without NASCAR. We're finally back. And hey, as we talked about last week, if you haven't checked it out yet, the NASCAR channel is now live on Tubi. And also, here's a cool fun fact. If you're on Tubi, you can also watch WTHR Plus on the same app. You don't have to switch apps at all. You can go from the NASCAR channel to WTHR Plus on Tubi. So how about that? So think about that the next time you're watching the Racing Report. Maybe switch over to the NASCAR channel if you're watching us on Tubi. Anyway, let's get into some big NASCAR news here, because if you're me, you're super excited about this. And I'm going to give you some background. I'm going to give you the news, and then I'm going to give you some background why I'm so excited about this. Kasey Kahne is coming back to NASCAR Kasey Kahne is coming back to the NASCAR Xfinity Series and NASCAR in general for the first time since 2018. And I'm thrilled about this. He will drive the number 33 Chevrolet for Richard Childress Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series when that series makes its return to Rockingham on April 19th. So April 19th is going to be the NASCAR Xfinity Series race return to Rockingham Speedway, which also just recently had a test there where we got to see Kasey Kahne turn some laps in the Chevrolet. A lot of other Xfinity drivers raving about the return of Rockingham Speedway to the schedule. Now, why am I so excited about this? Well, if you don't know me personally, which, let's be honest, you probably don't, when I was a kid, Kasey Kahne was my favorite driver. I mean, he was. Kasey Kahne was hands down my favorite driver in all of NASCAR. I cheered for him every single race weekend. I watched him compete in multiple different races. Every time I got to see a chance to see Kasey Kahne, it was a big deal for me, and I always relished in it. And in fact, when I got older, I couldn't necessarily be a fan of Kasey that much because, you become a journalist, you can't. Your fandoms kind of go away. You can't really be a fan of something that you're covering, right? So I really couldn't enjoy the last couple of years of Kasey Kahne's career, especially when he won his last race, the Brickyard, which I was also at, but I was covering as a journalist. So again, mixed emotions there. Couldn't really feel them until after the race was done. But then when he retired, I kind of just embraced the fact that, I still like Kasey Kahne. I always will like Kasey Kahne, but I don't have to be afraid of it now because he's retired. I don't cover him anymore. I can say I liked him in the same way as a bunch of current NASCAR journalists say, they like Jeff Gordon or Dale Earnhardt or, Bobby Allison or somebody when they were growing up. It's just like that. I just can't, go crazy about it. But I am thrilled that Kasey Kahne is back in an Xfinity car and back in NASCAR. Meanwhile, in the Cup Series, Corey LaJoie will return to Rick Ware Racing on a limited schedule in the now numbered 01 Ford Mustang. Now that goes for his Stacking Pennies podcast that he's promoting. And in addition to taking this limited deal with Rick Ware Racing, he will also join Amazon Prime's NASCAR coverage coming up this summer as a pre- and post-race analyst. Now, joining Corey LaJoie on the pre- and post-race shows for Amazon Prime will be a familiar face in Daniel Trotta. If you remember watching Race Hub for all those years, or even listening on SiriusXM NASCAR, Danielle Trotta does a lot of great work for NASCAR. So it's good to see her back on a broadcast, especially coming up this summer. Now, here's another big piece of NASCAR news that we want to talk about, especially since we're getting ready for the upcoming 2025 NASCAR season. NASCAR has announced that they will not be making any changes to the playoff format for 2025. But, there's a but. They did not rule out changes in 2026, and they are going to be evaluating everything about the playoff format in 2026. Now, Steve O'Donnell has said that the playoffs is not going to go anywhere. NASCAR is still going to have a playoff format, but they are open to tweaking it and seeing what areas can be improved. And I think what's important to note about this is during media days ahead of the Clash and Daytona and everything, Bob Pockrass sat down with a couple of drivers. And one of them was Kyle Larson, where Kyle Larson said flat out He said he thinks that team could win 20 races over the course of the year and not win the championship. And that would just – he's prepared for that reality. And that is an insane thing for the second most popular driver in the sport to be saying about the championship system. Saying it doesn't matter how many races he wins during the regular season or even in the playoffs. If he doesn't have a good Phoenix, he could just not lose the champion. He could just not be a champion. And that's legitimately what's happened, what we've seen with this playoff format, with this knockout-style playoff format. We talked about it at the end of the NASCAR season when we asked, do playoffs belong in motorsports, since we know that Supercars is getting a playoff system now. Kyle Larson said these comments. I think that should be alarming to NASCAR. I really do think that should be alarming, and I think that they should, whatever committee that they have looking into the playoffs and thinking about where they can improve, they should definitely be looking into a way to prevent what Kyle Larson has said is a legitimate possibility for him. Now, as we move on to the next piece of NASCAR news, this is pretty interesting. Jimmie Johnson has assumed majority ownership of Legacy Motor Club, as Maury Gallagher is now taking a minority stakeholder role, and he is also going to no longer be seeing the day-to-day operations of Legacy Motor Club. So Jimmie Johnson's role as an owner is expanding quite a bit now that we know that, and especially since we also know that would probably make sense since he's only got 2 races lined up for himself coming up this year. Maybe more? Who knows? He said something on the Rolex 24 broadcast that he was hoping maybe to run more races, but again, it's probably going to be 2 for right now. So we'll just have to see how all that plays out. Will LMC get better? How much of improvements will Eric Jones and John Hunter Nemechek be able to make over the next couple of weeks? Hopefully it's good progress. Hopefully it's good improvement, but we'll always have to see. Next piece of NASCAR news as we get ready for the Xfinity Series season to also kick off, and the trucks. We know that Ryan Truex is going to be running the season-opening Xfinity Series race at Daytona and the number 24 Toyota for Sam Hunt Racing. And this is big because, again, we talked about last week or a couple weeks ago that Ryan Truex did not have any rides lined up for him at Joe Gibbs Racing this year, but he was announced as the team's reserve driver. But what's nice is he still has the Toyota connection, which means he gets this ride with Sam Hunt Racing to go racing at Daytona, a track that he won at last summer, I think. Maybe a good pick. If I'm not a betting man, but if you are, maybe throw down $5 on Ryan Truex to win the Xfinity race at Daytona. I don't know. I'm just saying. But anyway, speaking of drivers in the Xfinity Series, Kyle Sieg, the younger brother to Ryan Sieg, who owns RSS Racing, is going to be running full-time with that team in 2025. So it'll be the Sieg brothers, Ryan and Kyle. Rest in peace, Shane. Fortunately, he couldn't see this or be there, but Ryan and Kyle Sieg will be competing in the Xfinity Series for 2025, and they will also have a third car that they will announce. They said it's basically entirely dependent on sponsorships, though. So if they find a funded driver, they'll have a third car, but if not, it'll just be Kyle and Ryan racing for that team. Andres Perez de Lara, the reigning ARCA Menard Series champion, will run full-time for Spire Motorsports starting this season in the number 77 truck in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. And just for Daytona right now, as of right now, we only know this is for Daytona, but he will be joined by Michael McDowell and Justin Haley in Spire Motorsports trucks at Daytona. So Michael McDowell is going to drive truck number 07, and Haley's going to drive truck number 7. So Perez de Lara is going to drive truck number 77, while Raja Karuth stays in car number 71. Good deal there. All right, that's it for NASCAR news. Let's go ahead and take a break here real quick, and then when we come back, we're going to recap the Rolex 24, and we're going to preview the NASCAR Clash at Daytona. So don't go anywhere. You're watching The Racing Report. Welcome back to the Racing Report. Let's talk Rolex 24. That's right, the Rolex 24 was this weekend. 24 hours of beautiful racing on Daytona International Speedway and that road course. Although I will admit, the paving of the back stretch, not my favorite thing. can firmly say it's not my favorite thing. And I did hear that Daytona's apparently looking into maybe painting that area for next year, kind of like how Charlotte does at the Roval, how a lot of Le Mans chicanes are done now. But yeah, that was a little bit hard to get used to on that first lap, seeing them go through and being like, oh yeah, there's no grass there anymore. They're not kicking up grass anymore. Okay, well, fun. But it was overall a very fun and enjoyable race, especially coming down to the end there. There was a lot of drama that was going on late in the race, especially with the leaders in overall and in GTP with the Penskes and the Meyer-Shank. I honestly thought there that Meyer-Shank and Tom Blomqvist were going to come out of the woodwork and they were just going to go after that Penske car of Felipe Nasr, who was driving. I thought that was, he was fighting the Penske number 6. He was fighting it as hard as he could. And it was great for Tom Blomqvist and it was great for Meyer-Shank because, I know that whole team really did not like being out of the IMSA series last year. Now they're back in it and they want to compete for a Rolex 24. They want to compete for championships in that series and now they're getting a chance to do it. And finishing second to start the season is not a bad way to kick things off. Though I will say their second car did not have that great of luck. Alex Palou behind the wheel. At the time, car had a problem, spun out, broke. That's what's going to happen in endurance racing. And that's what I love about endurance racing is that you have to build the perfect car to last 24 hours. And if you can't do that, everyone else moves up a spot. And you don't want that to happen, especially when things move so fast within the 24 hours that can happen. But let's go ahead and recap all the race winners, all the class winners, I should say. So overall, it was Porsche Penske, with Nick Tandy, Felipe Nasr, and Lawrence Vanthoor. Felipe Nasr obviously crossed the finish line first as he was behind the wheel of that car. But then in LMP2, we just talked about how they penalized the winning team, which was with Sebastian Bourdais was the winner, and Seabass, four-time Champ Car champion, Formula One driver, multi-time IndyCar winner, probably could have had a Indianapolis 500 there if things maybe went a little bit different. He probably, if he didn't get injured in 2017, do you think he would have won the race? Yes, I do. Why? Because Ed Jones finished third. So not gonna knock that. But hey, by the way, just because this is my show, Max Chilton finished fourth in that race and led the most laps. Just wanted to make sure that note got in there. But yeah, so again, Sebastian Bourdais got penalized, that whole team. And so now United Autosports, the team of Daniel Goldberg, Paul di Resta, Rasmus Lind, and James Allen won in LMP2. So even though Sebastian Bourdais has to give up his Rolex to Paul di Resta, Formula One fans are all over the place right now. They don't know what's going on. Like, what do you mean Paul di Resta and Sebastian Bourdais are winning sports car races at Le Mans? What do you mean? Yeah, well, that's what happens when Formula One's not everything, guys. Formula One's not everything. These guys are good drivers, very solid drivers, and it is what it is. But that's the news there. And then in GTD, Ford's back in victory lane in GTD. And GTD Pro Fold Multimatic Motorsports won their class. That was a huge win there. Christopher Mies, Dennis Olsen, and Frederick Vervich. Those guys won in the GTD Pro class. And then in the GTD class, it was AWA, the Corvettes. Corvettes won. Matt Bell, Ori Fidani, Lars Kern, and Marvin Kirchhofer were winners in GTD. So that's the Rolex 24. Getting ready for the 12 hours of Sebring now coming up in March. It's going to be a little bit until we get into another IMSA race, but Sebring, remember, that's going to be all on Peacock. So if you don't have Peacock yet, make sure you've subscribed to Peacock if you want to watch the full 12 hours of Sebring coming up here in March. Now, again, let's talk about the NASCAR Clash before we wrap things up. We've got 39 cars entered in the Cookout Clash at Bowman Gray. 23 will make the main event. Now, interesting to note here as well, we've got a couple of open entries here. The 66, obviously Garage 66, formerly MBM Motorsports. They're going to be entering Garrett Smithley in that event. And then also we talked about last week the team Amerivet entering Burt Myers in the number 50 Chevrolet for their, and he's, again, track champion at Bowman Gray for what feels like over 20 years, just about. So definitely a lot to look forward to. This is going to be a big deal. And remember, unlike the rest of the NASCAR series, the Clash and the Daytona 500 practice qualifying, that will be on FS1. But when Daytona ends, all practice qualifying is going to be on Amazon Prime. So just be aware of that when you're looking for NASCAR practice and qualifying coming up, that yes, FS1 is still going to televise practice qualifying for the Clash and for the Daytona 500, but by the next week, that's not going to be the case. By Atlanta, it's going to be on Amazon Prime. So get ready for that. But I am excited for the Cookout Clash at Bowman Gray. I think it's going to be an exciting race. I'm looking forward to seeing which teams come out guns a-blazing, basically, to start the season. Can Joey Logano, can Team Penske? If Team Penske can win the Rolex 24, and then the very next week, if one of those drivers, Cindric, Logano, or Blaney, if those guys go out and win the Clash, I'm going to start to think that Penske Perfect is just a way of life now. We just all have to accept Penske Perfect is going to always be around. But no, anyway, I'm looking forward to it, so don't miss it. It's going to be on Fox. Man, who needs to watch the Pro Bowl games? Come on, you're watching this show. You want to watch some good old-fashioned short track racing around a football stadium for Winston-Salem State University. So that's the kind of football I'm wanting to watch. Race cars racing around a football stadium just like they were doing last year, though you didn't have the grass, at the Coliseum. This year, Bob Pockers, if you haven't seen it yet, Bob Pockers posted on social media a picture of Bowman Gray, and they've got the infield grass of the football part, the football turf. It's all painted out in the logos. So it's got all the NASCAR logos, all the event logos on it. So it does. I kind of am sad that they didn't keep like the football style of it up. I kind of wish that they would have, maybe still had a football field with the hash marks and everything, but just have the Clash logo in the middle. I thought that would be kind of cool, but NASCAR went a little bit of a different direction than that. But still, I'm sure it's going to be exciting. This is the first NASCAR Cup Series race at Bowman Gray in forever. And guess what? Like I talked about that NASCAR Fast TV channel, the NASCAR channel, they've been re-airing several K&N races, several modified races from Bowman Gray. So if you want to get an idea of what we might be seeing coming up this weekend, go ahead and check that out. So, as always, this has been the Racing Report with Rob Peeters. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Remember to hit subscribe on WTHR's YouTube channel, and remember to tell all your friends every time there's a new Racing Report out. I'll post about it, so you should follow me on social media at rpeeters33. That's RPEETERS 33. That's how you'll find out whenever there's a new Racing Report that is up, and also we'll premiere them on WTHR Plus, so make sure to keep it there as well. So this has been another episode of the Racing Report. I hope you guys are looking forward to the Clash at Bowman Gray, and then later the Daytona 500. We'll talk about that next week when we get there. So don't go anywhere. Keep it right here on WTHR Plus for more episodes of the Racing Report. So, like I said, have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy the NASCAR, and I'll see you next time.